BetOnline is your number one source for all summer sports this season, whether it's golf, baseball, NBA, NHL playoffs, and then, of course, all the latest stats, news, scores and are all available as you follow your favorite teams. Glenn, it's been a crazy NBA playoff this year so far, NHL as well, but certainly with basketball. But I'm really excited for this partnership, looking forward to working with them, and hopefully you guys can have some fun using it.
Yeah, no doubt. And also with BetOnline, you can get all the latest odds, all the latest lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, odds on just about every sport you can imagine. So make sure you guys head to their website today. That's betonline.ag, or you can download their mobile app to your mobile device on both Android or Apple devices. It's just BetOnline AG. You'll see a big B there. Go ahead and download that. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I am James Haskell, along with my co-host and faithful compadre, Glenn Martin. And we're excited for this episode. We're excited for every episode, but in particular, as the draft process is over, it's really about understanding the guys that we got. So we're excited to talk about our draft picks from the people that have seen them for a long time. So, Glenn, what do we got cooking tonight for the folks?
Yeah, I'm excited. We always like to get guys in here who've, like Jimmy said, covered these guys for their, at least part of their career in college, if not the duration. And so we're going to welcome a new guest to the show, new friend of the show, Scott Eklund from dogman.com, also on the 247 network. Scott Eklund, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. As you can see, it looks like he's outside the schoolyard. That brick wall reminds me the side of the school back in high school and middle school.
Let me get really quickly, Scott. Really quickly. Glenn, I've known each other for a long time. Glenn, are you thinking of the side of the school at the middle school where the pool is?
100%. 100%. Wall ball off that side. You know that.
I learned to play wall ball there, and I won't take long with this story. First time I played wall ball, suicide wall ball with a bunch of high schoolers.
That'll get real
I was
out
like
there.
10. It was bad news, but I tell you what, I learned to play wall ball real quick.
Either you do or you don't. That's the only two options, and the second one's not good. But Scott, thanks so much for joining us. And like I mentioned, we like to have guys on that have covered them. How long? Like, when did you first meet Roger? How long have you been covering Roger's career?
Well, I met Roger during the recruiting process. I'm the recruiting editor over on dogman.com. And so I talked to, I don't know, roughly 200 to 300 kids during every cycle. And it's changing more and more every year. So it's getting even worse that I'm talking to more and more. But during Roger Rosengarten's cycle, it was the 2020 recruiting class that he came in with. And so that was a really messed up class because of the pandemic. But before that, his recruiting really started in 2018. And he was one of the top 2 or 3 linemen west of the state of Texas. He was very skinny. He looked more like a basketball player coming out of high school. But he was one of the top guys on the West Coast, basically west of Texas. And had offers from basically the entire Pac-12, basically the entire Pac-12. He had most of the Big Ten after him, Ohio State, Michigan, all those kind of schools were after him, Texas, basically if it was a top 25 school, he had an offer from it. But it really came down to, he was a West Coast guy. He wanted to stay on the West Coast. So when it came down to it, it really came down to Washington and Oregon. And he visited Oregon the weekend before he visited Washington, and he actually committed to Oregon silently. He didn't actually come out and say that, but he committed to them, and then said, I already told Washington I was going to take a visit, so I'm going to head up there on a visit. Took a visit to the University of Washington, and that was before Chris Peterson had retired. We didn't know he retired the day after the 2019 Apple Cup, which was traditionally the last game of the year against Washington State. And so Chris Peterson's Built for Life program, the thing that sold a lot of kids, just really impressed Roger Rosengarten and his family and everything like that. So he ended up committing to Washington, flipping his commitment to Washington. And that was a big win because Oregon, Washington and Oregon over the last decade, they've been pretty evenly matched. There was about 12 years where Oregon 12 straight games. But this is not me putting down Oregon. I mean, I love to make fun of Oregon as much as possible, but this is a good thing for them. They have Phil Knight backing up a lot of what they do, and they have the Nike marketing program behind what they do and everything like that. And so Oregon is really good at marketing to kids, not necessarily in their footprint from a recruiting standpoint. They can get kids from the East Coast, all that kind of stuff. And Washington typically would get guys who were good and had Oregon offers, and they would beat Oregon for it. But Oregon, if you went down on a head-to-head basis, Washington typically didn't beat Oregon for a lot of guys. Usually it was Oregon winning out on some of those. But in the long run, it's probably been better the guys that went to Oregon, and Washington just focused on the guys that stayed with went to the Huskies. But Roger was a guy who just really bought into the Built for Life program, and his parents were really big on that. And that's really what sold him on becoming a Husky. So he comes in the 2020 class, very highly acclaimed class, and ends up not playing that year, 2020. The Huskies only played 4 games that season. And then 2021, he redshirts, and that was the year that Jimmy Lake got fired from the University of Washington. Kalen DeBoer comes in, the only coach that he kept from Jimmy Lake kept most of the coaches. Scott Huff was the offensive line coach. The only coach that was retained by Kalen DeBoer from Jimmy Lake's staff was Scott Huff. Wow. And Roger Rosengarten, I keep calling him Roger Rosengarten. Sorry, I'll just say Roger. But Roger ended up staying at Washington. Didn't think about leaving. The transfer portal really wasn't a huge thing, as big as it is now back then. But stays at Washington. Starts as a redshirt freshman. He looked awful coming out of spring ball and fall camp. We were like, oh boy, this is going to be a struggle.
And did he start at left?
He started at right tackle both years.
Okay.
But coming out of fall camp, he had looked a little bit better. They rotate. Scott Huff liked to flip his guys so that they had that position versatility. Mm-hmm. So he would get left tackle work as well, but he mainly started on the right side. And then, the start of the season, 2022, it was a little rough. Washington lost to 2 teams they probably shouldn't have lost to, in UCLA and Arizona State that year, but they won the rest of their games that year, went 11-2 on the season. And then obviously you guys know what they did last year, 14-1. Last game of the season is the one they lost, national championship game. And Roger started every one of those games. That I can remember, didn't miss a game. And just one of the greatest kids. I call him a kid. He could eat me for lunch. But he's huge. But when you get him outside the lines, nicest, friendliest person, very engaging. Always, I always, because I start off with the recruiting process with a lot of these kids. I'm sorry, I'm going long-winded here, but I get to know some of these kids so well and their parents, that to have them go all the way through the process and all the way and stay at UW he was at University of Washington for 5 years. For him he and I just knew each other very well, and we felt very comfortable around each other. One story my wife asked if I was going to tell this story or not. They have picture day, and I'm not usually a fanboy. I try to separate myself and just be, I'm a reporter and things like that. Well, my kids, who are back then, they were 5 and 7. Now they're 7 and almost 9. They wanted to go to picture day, which is during fall camp 2022, right before Roger was going to start his first game at the University of Washington. And my youngest son is small for his size. He's small anyway, but then he's small for his age as well. And so I introduced him to Roger, who was 6'8", 310 pounds at the time, or 6'7", whatever he is. And I said, hey, this is Roger Rosengarten. He's going to be the starting right tackle for Washington. And my son looked at him, and he barely came up to his knee, man. It was such a size disparity. And I go, he eats really big meals. And Roger looks at my son and he just goes, I ate a burrito bigger than you for breakfast this morning. And my kid looked at him, and I've got a picture of it. I wish I could show you guys, but it's pretty funny. But and so when we saw Roger get drafted in it was second round, right? Second round that he got drafted. When we saw him get drafted, I said, "Hey, that's the guy who ate a burrito the size of you." And he said, "Can we root for the Ravens now? I really like him."
Nice.
So there you go.
Nice.
We're Seahawks fans here, but
Yeah.
Ravens are going to hold a special place in my heart for the next, hopefully, 10 to 15 years of Rodgers.
Yeah. Plus, you're, I know they're calling the Chargers Ravens West, but certainly one of the Harbaugh disciples in McDonald over there, with the Seahawks now. So a lot of connections there. But I tell you what, we were really excited. I got to be honest with you. At this moment in the draft for us, Glenn and I both, I think, wanted the same guy. That was Kingsley out of BYU. He's kind of a guy that played left and right tackle.
Another guy I got to know well in the process. Yep.
Exactly. And so anyway, when they took Rosengarten, we were both kind of like, not disappointed because we didn't know a ton about him. That was really what it was about. We had a guy that we liked and he was there at the time. But then when we started doing some research on this kid, there's some things that really stood out to us. My question to you really is, it seemed to us from a bird's eye view that he most likely fits as a right tackle in the NFL. And I think the way that we saw it was he might have a higher ceiling at right tackle than Kingsley, who's kind of a swing guy and could potentially play left, could potentially play right. Not sure where we think Rosengarten is just going to be a right. My question to you is, do you agree with that? And that, do you see him projecting as a right tackle in the NFL, or do you see him potentially as a guy that could, play it right and then have the potential to play left, say when Ronnie Stanley leaves or something like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I think his natural position is right tackle. And, at the University of Washington the last 2 years, he's protected Michael Penix's blind side. And because of what he was able to do now, obviously there's many different reasons why Michael Penix put up the numbers he did, but and led Washington to what he did. And Roger was part of the best offensive line in the country, if you go by just the award that they got, the Joe Moore Award. But I think his best side is on the right side. He's more of a power guy. He's very nimble on his feet, very light on his feet for a guy his size. He's got that natural length. He's got those really long arms. I think if he had played left tackle the last 2 years, he probably would be a left tackle in the NFL. But I think his more natural position is the right side. He is a guy, though, that has that position versatility. So if you need him in a pinch, if maybe Stanley leaves and you don't find a left tackle, you find a guy who's a more natural fit at right tackle, and Roger looks like he could move there, then maybe you try him there. But I've said this about many different guys throughout the years. If they could play anywhere along the offensive line and they'd be an all-conference guy, or that's for college, but like not an all-pro, Pro Bowl kind of guy, right? But so I could see Roger Rosengarten being a Pro Bowl kind of guy at left tackle. He's an all-pro right tackle. He's a guy who could be one of the most dominant tackles in the NFL if he develops like we think he can. He's obviously got a lot to learn. He's still, granted, he started 27 games over the last 2 years, but that's a lot asking him to go up against guys like TJ, and
TJ Watt, Myles Garrett,
all these guys that he's going to be facing on a week-to-week basis. So rookie year, it's going to be probably a bit of a stretch to think that he's going to, be a guy who can just be dominant. But if you give him 2-3 years at right tackle where he just learns that and he learns the tricks of the trade and all the different things that he needs to do, man, I think the sky's the limit for him. I love take out my relationship, my personal relationship that I have with him. I try to take that out of it when I do my analysis of guys. He's so special from an athletic standpoint. He's got that ideal build, long legs, high-waisted. And you guys will see when you get a chance to really sit down and interview him. If you guys, are in the locker room and do those kind of things, he is the most engaging, nicest guy. Even when Washington would lose, which didn't happen much when he was a starter, but even when they would lose, he would be just, he'd answer your questions, and he's well schooled in the art of not saying a lot, but he would never be you guys know how a locker room can be sometimes after losses. Guys can be douchebags and everything. Sorry about that if that's bad, but they can be not so fun to deal with. But Roger was never that person. He's always happy to talk and do what he needs to do to fulfill his obligations and keep people involved.
Yeah, probably a guy we'll see regularly behind the microphone for the Ravens if he's
very well spoken. There a lot of these linemen, come up there and it's like, oh boy, it is
right, yeah,
struggle. And he is not that kid. He comes out of Valor Christian High School, which is one of the better programs in the state of Colorado. The McCaffrey family. I think the dad might be the head coach there actually. But those guys all came out of there. There's a lot of really good players across the country that have come out of there. So he could be a really, really special player, not just on the team, but also with the media. I think he'd be fun to have in studio as a guy like the morning shows on the radio where they can kind of get a little jokey and do some fun things. He could be one of those guys.
Nice.
Wow, yeah, they're gonna love him. Now, I do got to ask you, I worry when I see a guy struggle in the biggest game, and I know it's a tough matchup. Obviously, you're in the championship. You're probably playing the best team, or at least one of the very best. So you understand there's a level of competition there. But should Ravens fans be at all concerned that it seemed like his worst game came in the biggest moment?
That's a good question. And people on our board, over on Dogman, they were like, well, Roger shouldn't go pro because he had a really bad game in the championship game. I wouldn't call it really bad, but he didn't have his best game. It was probably his worst game as a starter for the University of Washington. But one thing that you got to remember about a lot of these guys, but Roger in particular, he doesn't make the same mistake twice. He learns. Yeah. So what he learned in that Michigan game will not be something that he's going to struggle with again. I mean, he might struggle with power rushers. We don't have a ton of power rushers out here on the West Coast. Most of our edge guys are going to be the speed guys. He's going to get power in Myles Garrett. I mean, and TJ Watt. I mean, those guys are going to come right at you, and they don't give a flying, that you are a highly ranked guy. If anything, they love the highly ranked guys because they're going to take those guys to school. But, he's going to have to work. Part of it's just, I think he needs to get stronger in his base. That's going to be something. It's also about, learning how to set his feet a little bit better. He could easily put on another 10 to 15 pounds, and I don't think he'd lose any of his athleticism. Obviously, he has to put it on the right way because I could put on 10 to 15 pounds, and that would hurt me. But he could do it. If he does it the right way, he'll be fine. But, I don't think it's something to be concerned with for after this year. I think it's something where you might go, let's see what he looks like against Myles Garrett in the first time we play Cleveland. Let's see what he looks like against TJ Watt. But like I said, he picks up on nuances so quickly that you'll see him do things the second time he plays those guys that he wouldn't necessarily have been able to do the first time because he'd never seen them live. And Brandon Dorlus was a guy out of Oregon who was a really good player, and he didn't do anything against the University of Washington 2 years in a row. That he didn't do anything against the University of Washington. Kayvon Thibodeau was out of there, but he didn't play Roger. And I wish I could have seen Kayvon Thibodeau against him. But there's been a lot of really good edge guys come out of the Pac-12. They're just speed guys. They're not power guys. And so Brandon Dorlus is probably the closest that's been to that. And Brandon Dorlus, I wanted the Seahawks to take Brandon Dorlus because I thought he was a really good player. But he didn't do anything against the University of Washington, and that's because of what Troy Fautanu did on the left side and Roger Rosengarten was able to do on the right side.
Man, I'm so excited for this guy. And you spoke to a lot of things. Obviously, his ability to learn quickly and then to pick up on nuance. The type of teammate he is. Is there anything surprising that the Ravens fans may not know about him as far as his game or who he is as a person that we should be excited to look out for? Something that maybe doesn't show up in the scouting report or that is generally isn't known about him.
Wow. His ability to pull and get out in the space, like on screens. He will be able to get to that second level pretty easily and really take guys on in space. He isn't going to miss blocks in the open field. He's going to be able to reach safeties, and he might struggle to get a corner out in full space, but
sure.
I mean, he can do it. There is not a weakness other than handling bull rushers, and it's partly because he just hasn't had to do it very much. Other than taking those guys on, I can't think of a real weakness in Roger's game. He's just an overall talent. He might not be the greatest at everything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't think there's a thing
like a glaring weakness.
Yeah, glaring weakness. There just really isn't. And I mean, if you listen, okay, Mel Kiper, I know he's from the Baltimore area.
Yeah, that's our guy. That's our guy, man.
He's
15 minutes up the road from me, Scott.
I'm a Mel Kiper Jr. minion fanboy. I love Mel Kiper Jr. I've loved him since I was a kid. One of the reasons was I played a little bit of small college football, but I was never going to do anything. So when I heard that he did, I mean, you guys know the story behind how he got his job, right?
Yeah.
He wrote up all those things for was it Wellington Mara? It was the New York Giants ownership, whoever it was. And they were like, yeah, you don't need to be working for us. Go do your own thing. You're going to make a lot more money doing that. But Mel Kiper said if Roger Rosengarten had come back and stayed healthy, he was a number one, or not number one, but he was a first-round draft choice. And so you guys essentially got a first-round draft choice in 2025 a year early. And so now he gets to learn from you guys, and he's got that talent level.
Yeah, no complaints here. No complaints here from us for sure. I have a quick follow-up. Sorry, Glenn, I'm going to ask him another one here. And I might be stealing Glenn's question. You've spoken to us a little bit, but one of the things Glenn talks about a lot is the difference between our offensive scheme. If you're familiar with old Greg Roman and the offensive line, those are his wide receivers, right? Like that's the way that he views offense, right? Forget real wide receiver, doesn't really throw the football that much. But of course, Todd Monken is different in that, unfortunately, we only had 6 rushing attempts in the AFC Championship game. But schematically is what I want to get to, really, is that he likes to leave he doesn't want to worry about his tackles. Likes to leave him out on an island. You got to do your thing. He's expecting you to win your matchup. And one of the things I think that Glenn pointed out was that this seems to be a really good fit in comparison to what we have now. How do you feel about him out there in that type of a scheme where he's not getting a ton of help? He's in he's in a one-on-one battle all game. Sounds like you feel pretty good about that, but just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, if you go back, watch some of Washington's games. I mean, you can go back and watch the extended highlights of Washington. I mean, the Washington-Oregon games are going to be the best games you can see, but there's also the USC game where they played Caleb Williams and had that, I can't even remember, 50-47 win or 50-42 win, whatever it was. And you can just watch. Washington put their tackles on islands, and they were expected to handle their guys. Now, they helped them every now and then. They might have chipped with a tight end or chipped with a back or something like that. But for the most part, Roger and Troy had to handle things on their own. I mean, that's what they were asked to do because Washington was going to send out 3, 4, 5 wide receivers every time they got the opportunity. And Ryan Grubb runs a very quarterback friendly offense. I think Todd Monken does too. And I think that I see no reason why scheme should be an issue for Roger Rosengarten. Now, honestly, I would find it a little bit more distressing if he was with more of a ground and pound, not because he's not good at that, but he's going to be much better as a guy who's stuck out on an island, asked to protect, and then do some things in the running game, like pull, like get out in the screen game and things like that. He's fine. He'll do just fine. It might take him a little bit. It might take him half a season to really feel that comfort level, because that's what it did his first year as a starter at the University of Washington. But once he did that, I don't remember I don't remember any problems from him in some of the biggest games other than the Michigan game. But if you look at the Texas game where they were sending guys left and right, he handled things just fine. Both Texas games, they played Texas in the Alamo Bowl and at the end of 2022, and then they played him in the Sugar Bowl in 2023, won both of those games, and Roger was a big reason why.
Yeah,
I love it.
I tell you, everything you're saying that he does well is I think what the Ravens are going to be asking him to do. And
yeah, I hate building him up like this because everybody's going to go, this guy basically is ready to marry Roger Rosengarten. And I honestly
got a lot of confidence in him.
Yeah. I'm a talent evaluator. So when I do the talent evaluations, I do say, hey, this guy needs to work on this and this. The only thing that I can, truthfully say that I think he needs to work on is just getting a little bit stronger and maybe just getting a little more, obviously getting more experience. Since he's a rookie, he's not going to have that, that's just going to come with years of being in the league. But 3, 4, 5 years from now, you could be talking about an all-pro. I mean, that's how good he is. He is what's the guy from Indianapolis that came from Notre Dame? Quentin
Nelson. Yeah.
Quentin Nelson. He's that, except at tackle. That's the kind of guy you're getting.
Oh, love to hear that.
I didn't tell you what. I to your point, when I'm watching his tape, the development of his pass blocking already to this point is really incredible. Like the advanced, the way he can set a guy up, the counters he has, the way he doesn't just come out in one set every time. He'll change it up. He'll come out, attack a guy one snap. Next thing he's dropping back, letting the guy come to him. It's always changing up. And that type of advance, I mean, you can tell he's well coached. And look, I don't think there's a better offensive line coach in football than what the Ravens have now in Joe D. So he's going from one great O-line coach to another one. And with that athleticism he has, like that's the stuff you can't coach. So you put the technique on top of that athletic ability and size. It's just, man, it's like imagine him pulling with Pat Ricard, who's a 310-pound fullback who can move like a polar bear. Like that coming at you with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson standing in the backfield. I mean, it sounds like an absolute nightmare, Scott. I can't wait to see it. We'll be there, obviously, for everything, training camp included. But, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. And why don't you let the folks know where they can find you, all the stuff you're working on.
Oh, yeah. Over on, if you guys want to follow somebody 3,000 miles away, and covering guys that might end up Ravens down the road.
That's right.
My Twitter that's mainly what I use. It's Scott, SCOTT, and then Eklund, EKLUN as in Nancy, D as in David, Eklund. And it's just my name in one word on Twitter. We're also over on Dogman, DAWGMAN.com. Same colors as the Ravens, so you wouldn't have to change colors at all. And no, we I know all of Husky Nation is very excited to see Roger and what he can do at the next level. This is the most impressive draft class Washington has ever featured. They had they've had more guys taken, but that was in the old days when they had like 20 rounds or whatever that.
Right, yeah.
And in 1991, that's the team that won the national title. Everybody says we shared it with Miami, but everybody knows Washington would have wasted Miami that year. But that year Steve Entman goes number 1, and Dana Hall was a defensive back, and he went in the teens somewhere. But other than those two were the 2 first-round draft choices, and the rest there was a lot drafted later on. Washington had 3 players drafted in the first round for the first time. I mean, wow. It was. We're a very good program. We've been a top. I say we. They have been a top program for a long time, top 25 for a long time. But they are not Ohio State. They are not Texas. They are not Alabama. These are schools who regularly have people drafted in the first round. Washington just doesn't have that typically on a year-to-year basis. So this was a special team, and Roger was a big part of why this team was special.
Oh, got me all excited, Scott. We appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And make sure you guys go give him a follow like Scott said. But that's it for us tonight, folks. Thank you and have a great one.
See you.